Betrayal, revenge, insanity. These three words are used like this once in Unordinary, and it's not in the place that you'd expect. This will be my last video of the year. It's going to be a little shorter than usual, and it won't be part of the character chart series, but while I was reading and analyzing Unordinary, I noticed something that's very, very interesting. Betrayal, revenge, insanity are used once, and it's during the flashback on how John and Serafina became friends. Before they were all chummy, before we see them now, they really, really hated each other. But they're forced to work on a project together. The project is analyzing and presenting 3 of Shakespeare's works: Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet. I'm not the biggest fan of these stories, but luckily the internet exists, so I don't need to read any of them. Hamlet, if I could steal an introduction from John and Serafina, this story is about a mystery surrounding the death of a king. Even with his sudden death, the kingdom was able to find a replacement almost immediately. It turns out that the queen had been conspiring with the new king all along, and the entire death was planned. Hence the theme, betrayal, with the 3 points they focus on being the 3 words I mentioned at the beginning of this video: betrayal, revenge, insanity. But wait, let's think about that for a second. The downfall of a king. Doesn't that sound familiar? That's right, I'm going to draw parallels between these 3 stories in the series of Unordinary. So first things first, let's draw the parallel between Hamlet and Unordinary. And to draw that parallel, we need to start looking backwards, when John was the king of New Boston. John was a terrible king. If I can steal a quote from Eisen, he was a terrible enough king for his own people to turn on him, and he was cruel enough to beat them all half to death. For those of you who are unaware of how things went down, John was a low tier, but suddenly his power level shot up and he became the new king. He wasn't close to anyone except 2 people, Adrian and Claire. Adrian was John's friend before John was king, through thick and thin. However, Claire became friends with John randomly. You see, Claire's ability is precognition. She can see visions of the future. According to Adrian, it's about Claire. I overheard her talking to the Jack. She said the only reason why she approached you that day was because she had a vision, long before, of you climbing to the top. And because you were so weak and isolated at the time, she wanted to get to you first. That's the only way you trust her and rely on her. She's been using you this whole time. She had a vision that you'd be overthrown, and that the Jack would take your position. They're gathering people behind your back as we speak. You need to be careful. But John doesn't believe him, even beating up his own friend. However, Adrian was right. Claire got a group of people to try to take down John, and she failed. These 2 correlate to betrayal and revenge. You see the parallels? Alright, cool. The queen betrayed the king to try and incorporate a new king into the system. Nice, but what about that last point, insanity? Well, let's take a look at John's punishment. After being expelled from New Boston High School, he was subject to 3 months of readjustment classes. Here we meet Keon. He starts to kind of tear into John's character. What you don't understand is that everyone in society has a role to fulfill. You're lost, mindlessly throwing power around. You haven't a clue what to do. You have absolutely no control. That's why all late bloomers, like you, are doomed to fail. They both get kind of physical, eventually using his ability to make John relive his memories over and over and over again. Seeing himself beat up his friends over and over again. Seeing himself beat them up for no reason. For 3 months, Keon slowly but surely breaks John. Look at him after these 3 months. Empty. Broken. Reliving your worst memory over and over again will make anyone insane. So that's why Hamlet makes sense. What about the other 2? Well, unfortunately, they don't explain the story between these 2, so I'm not entirely sure what to focus on, and it also means I have to research. Okay, what I found out about Macbeth. Macbeth is a Scottish general, and he received a prophecy that he will receive the rank of Thane, a rank of nobility, and one day he would be the King of Scotland. Macbeth is a little weary of this, but he does receive the rank of Thane, so he tells his wife about the prophecy, and of course, his wife would love for him to be king. So, spurred on by his wife's desire, Macbeth kills the current king, becoming the new one. Replace Macbeth and his wife with John and Cecile, and you basically get the later half of this first season. John did not care that much about royalty. However, Arlo forced his hand, and with the assistance of Cecile, he kills the king. I hope you can hear the quotes around kills, but Arlo is just dethroned, technically making John the new king. There's also the part of the story that Macbeth feels guilty for the murder. However, John doesn't feel bad for anyone. Not yet, at least. Seraphina. But that leads into our last Shakespeare piece, Romeo and Juliet. I'm sure you know where this is going. Romeo and Juliet is a classic tale of star-crossed lovers, where they both loved each other so much, however belonged to two different families that hated each other. In the end, they both die. So how do we apply this to our series of Unordinary? I don't think we can. At least not yet. I believe that this is hinting towards what's to come in the future. I think it's obvious that Romeo and Juliet are John and Seraphina. Even if they're not romantically involved, they belong to opposite sides. The highest high tier and the crippled, the lowest of the low tiers. And it's not just that they belong to opposite sides, but the people on their sides aren't excited about the two interacting. We see people like Arlo and Cecile, and even to a lesser extent Blake or Eisen. They don't like that Seraphina is hanging out with some crippled. And while John doesn't really have anyone on his side, they call him a suck-up, a lapdog, someone who became friends with the strongest student in the school just for protection. Even now it's opposite. John is now the highest power in Wellston, while Seraphina has dropped to the bottom. So what can this mean for our main characters? Well, a lot. We've established that when a character dies in their story, the parallel doesn't mean they die in Unordinary. The king in Hamlet died, but John was just dethroned. The King of Scotland was killed by Macbeth, but Arlo was just dethroned. So, death could just mean dethroned. Death could just mean they lose their rank. Maybe both John and Seraphina lose their ability, thus their spot in royalty. I mean, it could mean that they both die, but I think that's a bit dark for Unordinary. However, it's still a possibility. But I do think it means that Seraphina will eventually forgive John. Most likely about learning about his past. But really, who knows? Anyways, happy holidays, y'all. I'm recording this on Christmas. So, all good. Guys, I did not get a chance to thank you. Last Thursday night, UE hits 1,000 of us. Man, 1,000. And today it's like 1,100. So, that's insane. Thank you very much. So this is leading me to say that next week will be a Q&A. If you have any questions, want me to answer, put them in the comments. I'll also put a comment for those who don't watch all the way to the end. And like always, thank you for watching.